Welcome to the first episode of Bardock's Revenge video thingamajig. I hesitate to call it a podcast because it's only me. Talking about the Saiyan Oppressive Mastery nerf, if it really is considered a nerf, if it really fixed the problem, and other things. This episode is brought to you by my lack of a love life. Not kidding. Anyway, I should get right back into it. So, to those who don't know what happened over a couple days ago, Saiyan Oppressive Mastery got nerfed, and it got nerfed to the point where you cannot MPPV with it. I'm just going to go outright say that that does not make Saiyan Oppressive Mastery any worse than it really already is. And I'm not really one to talk because I don't play this game too much anymore, and that's mostly because work-related reasons, but I'm still in the community. And from what I gather, the problem with Saiyan Oppressive Mastery isn't the fact that it can MPPV, and it's very good at MPPVing, like with Trunks. It's the fact of the matter that you're refusing to let your opponent play the game. And this is problematic in the idea that Panini was very, very straightforward with the idea that we don't want players to think that they can't play the game. And coming from Yu-Gi-Oh!, I can tell you, first and foremost, that there were a lot of decks that prevented you from really playing the game. You just simply could not play the game. They would refuse. There's a card called the Final Countdown, and you had 20 turns, 10 turns per player, to win the game, by any means. And that meant by reducing your opponent's deck to 0, by reducing their life points to 0, by getting Exodia. You had to win somehow, some way. And the problem with the Final Countdown wasn't the card itself, it was the deck that built around it. And how Final Countdown worked was you played Final Countdown, and then your deck was filled with just stuff that prevented your opponent from really doing anything. They played cards that ended battle phase, which is essentially combat. They played cards that destroyed tons and tons of monsters just to prevent your opponent from really doing anything, while your opponent is struggling to get the damage off because the main way to win Yu-Gi-Oh! Was life points. It prevented the player from really playing the game. So you really sit down and you think to yourself, okay, I'm going to face a Final Countdown deck. I have to figure out a way to win. And it's just like, no. The problem with that was... But the difference with Final Countdown in Yu-Gi-Oh! And Saiyan Oppressive Mastery is the fact of the matter that Saiyan Oppressive Mastery is very, very powerful. Final Countdown. The thing with Final Countdown was, while it was annoying as fuck to play against, it was not a problem. Like, yeah, I played against it twice, maybe, in my entire Yu-Gi-Oh! Career. I played it, only twice. I played competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! For 5+ years, and there were barely times where I got to see it, where I saw that. And the problem with Saiyan Oppressive Mastery is the fact that because it's so powerful, it's problematic. And I'm just kind of iterating what other people are thinking right now. You know, oh, Saiyan Oppressive Mastery is super uber powerful because Saiyan Oppressive Mastery is as powerful as it is. The issue with it being that it just prevents your opponent from really doing anything. Up to this point, skips were always a thing, even in set 1 with Saiyan Gut Kick, or I think Saiyan Gut Kick may have been a set 2 card. I think it was set 1. And you skip your opponent's action, and what skipping really meant was your opponent can't do anything right now. That really only worked with a handful of things. That only worked with, unless you had like a certain super combo, like, or you needed to crit real fast, you play like a card that skips, and then you essentially had an extra turn to do what you needed to do. But to run dedicated skipping did not do much. And what Fanzy did was it said, okay, let's take Saiyan Oppressive Mastery, or let's make a mastery that gives support to all of this skipping function, because we essentially had a skipping function ever since set 5 with Saiyan Sword Skill. And nobody really ran it because there was nothing to really abuse it with. And Saiyan Oppressive Mastery essentially has said, okay, we have all of this skip support, now we're going to make something out of it. And it destroyed, essentially, how Saiyan works. Because of Saiyan Empowered gone, and rightfully so. I think Saiyan Empowered was the most dumb mastery out of the Saiyan group, but the problem with Saiyan Oppressive Mastery is it's really converted how Saiyans are played. Saiyan Rampaging Mastery is dull in comparison because, you know, hey, why would you risk doing damage? Like, why would you risk not getting the anger you need when you can just skip the anger and get all the anger you need? It makes no sense. You know, it's like, why would you run anything else? The only thing I could argue is Saiyan Dynamic Mastery if you're running Unleashed, which, before Saiyan Oppressive Mastery, because you could still MPPV, it was kind of like this question, well, do I want to run MPPV? You know, do I want to run MPPV, or can I just run Unleashed and skip it? And with the new nerf, all it really did was make that decision easier. You know, it didn't change, like, being unable to MPPV did not change much at all. Because whether or not you MPPV'd is not the problem with the mastery, if that makes any sense. It's like, not being able to MPPV with Saiyan Empowered is a great example. Like, if Saiyan Empowered could MPPV, that would be ridiculously overpowered, because you're gaining anger basically everywhere. You know, you rejuvenate a card, you get an anger. You gain an anger. You know, you play an attack, you get an anger. You gain an anger, you gain an anger. Not really, but most attacks that gained anger got you 2 anger. And with, like, Saiyan, even with, like, with Trunks, with his awakening stack, would make that even more ridiculous. So it's like, it's a necessity for MPPV, for Saiyan Empowered, because the point of Saiyan Empowered is to not MPPV, but get to those latter levels quickly, so you can do as much damage as possible, because that's how Saiyans work. That really didn't see any light until Saiyan Empowered Broly, but you get the idea. The problem with Saiyan Oppressive Mastery isn't the fact that Saiyan Oppressive Mastery is able to do all of this damage, or it can MPPV, and can MPPV rather quickly. The problem is that your opponent really doesn't have the ability to fight back. And getting rid of MPPV makes the Trunks problem lesser. And I know he did get nerfed, so you can't loop Blinding Energy move, but let's say they release a new, FanZ releases a new Trunks stack that is essentially a combination between his old stack, his evolution stack, to be more specific, his evolution stack number 1, or excuse me, his level 4, evolution stack level 4, and his awakening stack level 4. Let's say it was a combination. Your attacks do +3 stages, and you gain 2 anger. The problem is that, and they have, like, ridiculously high power level. It's like, you get to those latter levels, and now you just essentially have a copy of Broly. So Saiyan Oppressive Mastery, its ability to skip just does not, nothing really fixes itself. Nothing really gets fixed at this point. And by getting rid of MPPV, yeah, you don't have to run, you know, Orange for Orange Meditation, because if you really take it in consideration, there are no cards that act like Orange Meditation does, in the sense that you can reduce anger passively. You know, almost every your opponent loses, their anger is an active, or is related to some active action. You know, some action, like attacks that lower anger, for example. Off the top of my head, Saiyan Legendary Strike. That has to be, you know, played in order to lose the anger, whereas Orange Meditation is like, oh, I can passively play it. But the problem with Saiyan Oppressive Mastery, again, is not the fact that you can MPPV as fast as you can. It's the fact of the matter that you can MPPV as fast as you can while preventing your opponent from really doing anything. So a lot of people did not like Ascension Trunks in the sense that it could basically ignore everything your opponent was doing, and you could just sit there and just gain anger and gain anger and gain anger and gain anger and just keep going and going and going and going without worrying about what your opponent's doing. And unless they're running dedicated lower your anger mass quantities 3, 4, unless they were getting like shoulder bash or shoulder slam, excuse me, every turn, which we know is not possible, then you're really going to be MPPVing, and you're going to be MPPVing quick with Ascension Trunks, you know, Ascension really in general. But Saiyan Oppressive Mastery, back to Saiyan Oppressive Mastery, it's like, the problem isn't that Saiyan Oppressive Mastery can do these things. I remember what it was. Saiyan Oppressive Mastery did it in the sense that you can't do anything about it. Your opponent's gaining anger like crazy, you can't do anything about it. Why? Because you can't play any actions. There's nothing you can do. You have to watch your opponent do all this bullshit in front of you, and you don't get it. With Ascension Mastery, Ascension Ferrari Trunks, you still had actions. You could still do stuff. Yeah, Ascension, there might have been a you know, I think Ascension, doesn't Ascension skip your opponent's action? I forget off the top of my head. Yeah, even if it, yeah, if you banish a style card, your opponent skips his next action, I believe. Even if that happened, you still had something. You could still keep going. The problem isn't the problem is you can't keep going. So the nerf is like, well, you know, okay, so you can't PB as fast. That's respectable, but like that doesn't solve the problem. And I play a lot of video games and other things that they're like, oh, this thing is ridiculously overpowered. Let's nerf the thing that's not making it ridiculously overpowered. Let's go around the problem. Instead of hitting the problem head on, let's go around the problem. And to me, it's kind of hard to nerf Saiyan Oppressive Mastery without making it god-awfully useless. Everyone's like, oh, make it only one per... Make it one per combat. You can skip one action per combat, or that's only once per turn or whatever. But that kind of kills the anger gain idea. Now you're just kind of going back to Saiyan Rampaging or Dynamic. You know, it's like we can nerf around the problem and keep it overpowered, or we can nerf the problem itself and not make it powerful at all, or powered at all. Just kind of rereading it. It's like, okay, so first style attack. Okay, when your opponent skips an action. So what is the overpowered interaction? The overpowered interaction is Saiyan Sword Skill, which is another problem. Unleashed. Unleashed is just this huge big ball of power card that basically says, well, your loops can just keep going. I mean, not your loop, but your skipping just keeps going and going and going and going and doesn't stop. So, and with the new MPPV nerf, so that you can't MPPV, the decision of whether or not I should run Unleashed is irrelevant. It's irrelevant now. Because it's like, well, before it's like, oh, maybe I should keep MPPV, because if I keep MPPV, you know, maybe I can MPPV a little bit. But the problem is like, now it's like, well, there's really no point in not running it. So if you're not going to run Unleashed, despite the fact that you can't MPPV, why not? You know, why not run Unleashed? This is like, if you're running Saiyan Empowered Broly, why aren't you running Unleashed? Because it's just so good. You get Rescue. Rescue gets you anger. It enables the Menace loop, you get Saiyan Strength Test, and Saiyan Strength Test is like, wow, you get it that quickly. You know, it's just, what it's basically become is Saiyan Empowered is off the grid, and instead of Saiyan Rescue or Saiyan Strength Test, you get Saiyan Sword Skill. And it's just, and the reason why this is just so powerful is because the skipping strategy has just been so swept under the rug for so long that finally now it's out, and now it actually has support. It's becoming problematic. Okay. Lastly, if I said Saiyan Sword Skill is overpowered, most people would laugh in my face. Now they agree with me, you know. So Unleashed is a problem. Give me once. With Unleashed being just this big problem, it causes so many issues. And then we look at Saiyan Sword Skill attached to your MP. While attached, your attacks gain hit, your opponent skips his next action, banish this card when you do critical damage. Okay, you know, the problem is with this is that it hits, it's all of your attacks. To me that's one of the big problems with Saiyan Sword Skill, is the fact that it's all your attacks. So Free Vegeta, and I know people are like, well, Free Vegeta isn't really the problem, it's really Trunks, you know. Free Vegeta is still a problem. You can keep trying to argue that Free Vegeta is irrelevant to, you know, Saiyan Sword, you know, the whole Saiyan Sword Skill idea. It's still relevant. It's still relevant enough to the point where it's like, okay, you skip your next action. Okay, well, you know, because you unleashed into it, and then you get all your attacks, and then your Vegeta level 4 says your freestyle attacks can't be stopped. That's a problem. So now you're skipping, and most people are like, well, it's hard to get to level 4. Not with Unleashed. You know, you can keep arguing that Unleashed isn't a problem, Unleashed isn't the problem, Unleashed isn't the problem, but if you really boil it down to it, it is a huge problem. So Free Vegeta is ridiculously overpowered. Blinding Energy move loop. Supposedly, you know, oh, they fixed that by making your Trunks only do style. That doesn't stop Draku. Okay. So yeah, you know, Draku, oh, you can only get it through the later levels. So it's like, Saiyan Oppressive Draku is still very much a thing. Just because it's not the mainstream thing, because Trunks could loop it better than Draku. So it's like, there's all these, you know, negative issues, right, around what's going on with Saiyan Oppressive Mastery, and the Fan Z team, and I'm not shit-talking them, the Fan Z team got rid of MPPV. So basically what that means is that that's like one very, very small flaw in the system. You get rid of that, but what about this problem, and this problem, and this problem, and this problem? Well, we're working on that, or maybe it'll come later when we get an idea. Well, to me, like, that should be a priority, because this is breaking the game, you know. Everyone was so concerned about Krillin breaking the game, they probably didn't realize that Trunks was going to be the #1 offender. Not saying that that's a bad thing, and I'm not shit talking Trunks, but I'm just saying, it's like they got rid of Saiyan Empowered Mastery and they replaced it with a worse Saiyan Empowered Mastery. Essentially, is what's going on. You know, I love the Saiyan. I love Saiyan style. Like, I don't play Saiyan too much, not anymore at least. But Saiyan was fun, and it was great. I liked it. I loved it. But Saiyan is just not that good right now. Or, excuse me, not that good right now. Excuse me. That's not right. Saiyan is just, I just don't want to play Saiyan right now, because it's like, it's either Saiyan Oppressive Mastery or you're nerfing yourself just a tiny bit. Why would you not run Unleash? Why would you not run Saiyan Oppressive Mastery when you can do so much more? You know, you can Unleash into Saiyan Sword Skill, into whatever the hell MP you're playing, really. I just hate it. I just don't. I hate decks that basically say, if you're not running this, then why are you running this? Like, if you're not, like, why would you not run Broly if you're gonna run Saiyan Empowered? Oh, because I want to try a Saiyan Empowered porn cell a thing, or I want to run Saiyan Empowered whatever, you know, Gohan or whatever. Awakening Gohan. Well, why aren't you running Broly? Why aren't you running Future Gohan? And the Saiyan archetype has basically boiled down to, why aren't you running Saiyan Oppressive Mastery? It's just that good. It's just that good. Like, why would you run iffy damage or iffy anger gain with Saiyan Rampaging? Why would you run Saiyan Dynamic when you can just Unleashed out of level 1 ridiculously quickly? It's like, and then of course Saiyan Empowered's frozen, so there's really no point in bringing that up, but that's what Saiyan has basically boiled down to. Saiyan Oppressive Mastery or don't play Saiyan. And that's what freaking sucks about Saiyan Empowered, and that's what sucks about Saiyan Oppressive Mastery. Now, probably what most people are thinking right now is, how do we fix this? How do we fix Saiyan Oppressive Mastery? And I really can't say. I'm not one of those guys that really knows how to deal with balance changes and shit. I'm definitely one of those, throw it on the wall, see what sticks, and then make what is causing major issues less of a major issue. But, I don't know. If I had to say, make Saiyan Sword Skill your styled attack only. Maybe swords, maybe not even sword. Just your styled attack. Styled attacks. So that prevents free Vegeta from really being a thing, like being like a super stupidly big thing. Or, with Saiyan Oppressive Mastery specifically, your deck cannot have cards in it that end combat. To me, that's fair, for a couple of reasons. Number one, the only real offender in this category is Blinding Energy move. That's one of the only, offenders. Like, if there's another offender, someone will probably correct me. But that's the biggest offender everywhere, is Blinding Energy move. The second thing is, because now, because you can't have them, it really fits the Saiyan archetype in the sense that you want to stay in combat. So I think that's definitely worth looking into. To everybody who says, well, wouldn't style, for Saiyan Sword Drill, I agree that it should be styled cards only. So that way, free Vegeta can't be really that bad. And it prevents saying sword. I'm not saying it should prevent the sword archetype, but it's like to me it's a necessary evil, to get rid of the interaction with the sword. I don't know. I'm just talking out of my ass. I can't really say for a lot of people. Some people will say, well, it's not really the sword interaction problem. If everyone says, oh, well, just make the skip function swords only, that might work. I could definitely see that, but I'm not entirely convinced. I don't think, or if your opponent, or this is an idea. If your opponent would make the constant effect, so you can't get rid of. If your opponent would skip their action, if you play in a card effect that would skip your action, skip your opponent's action, raise your anger, or gain 2 stages instead. Because so basically what that does is that makes Saiyan Sword Skill okay, here's how I would do it. Saiyan Oppressive Mastery, make the constant effect. If your opponent would skip an action, raise your anger 1 level or gain 2 stages instead. And then of course you can in MPPV. Okay. This is why this kind of hear me out. Saiyan Sword Skills changed so that your skipping can only work with styled attacks. So what does that do? That enables you to kind of play this middle ground between Saiyan Empowered and Saiyan Rampaging. in the sense that you skip, you gain an anger, or you gain 2 stages, so it's kind of that middle ground. Unleashed is still a problem, but now it's not that big a deal. And the idea of looping blinding energy move has kind of reduced, at least a tiny bit. Okay? You know, oh, you have blinding energy move. Okay, yeah. It doesn't skip. You end combat, but your opponent can still do stuff. That's how I see it. That's how I would see it. I don't agree that this is the best way to do it. And there's probably someone out there who's already come up with a brand new good idea that still works. But to me, it's like you have that middle ground. So now, yeah, you can still blinding energy move or unleashed into Saiyan Sword Skill, but it doesn't force you to play this one archetype. Now you know. Oh, okay. So you don't MPPV, but you still got all these skips, and you run unleashed, and you do this and you do that. Or you can go Saiyan Rampaging and still have that MPPV factor. You can run dynamic and still have that factor of I'm on a ladder level rather quickly at the start of the game. That's just my opinion, because the problem with this detrimental idea, or this idea, you know, Saiyan Oppressive Mastery as a whole, is that Saiyan Oppressive is just... It's defining the archetype. It's defining the Saiyan style. And that's not fun. It's not fun because it's like, I want to run Saiyan. Okay, and I kind of already reiterated this, but imagine a brand new player. Imagine someone coming in from Dragon Ball Super, and he's like, I've been on Retro for Dragon Ball Super for like the past 2 weeks, a month, and I keep seeing this Fanzy and this Pansy, you know, and I'm kind of interested. I want to look at it. And then they go to Retro, and then they're like, okay, so what's Retro? And it's like, oh, you know, and they're looking through these and everyone, you know, shows them. And then they run through the list of MPs, and it's like, I want to run Nappa. Okay. Well, I have a Saiyan Oppressive Nappa build, but I kind of want to run Dynamic. Well, no, don't run Dynamic. Run Oppressive, because Oppressive is just that much better. You know, it's detrimental, and it's also detrimental to people who really only play this game online, because they're sitting there and they're like, oh, I'm going to go play on Octagon. You know, imagine a brand new guy who's just gotten to this game, who just barely got the basics of what's going on, sit down and want to play on Octagon, learned what Octagon is, and then sat down to play on Octagon, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to play Octagon, and then someone breaks out Saiyan Oppressive Trunks, or Saiyan Oppressive Vegeta, and just wipes the floor with them. Well, that's not very fun. You know, I basically couldn't play. And those kinds of decks do exist in other games, but they're not powerful enough to be considered great contenders. Final Countdown in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a great example. It's not a contender. It's a powerful deck. I think it got nerfed like a year or two ago, but whatever. But it's like, if someone sat down and played a Final Countdown deck, it was annoying as shit, but you wouldn't see that in regular tournaments. Because someone either already found a strategy that prevented you from really doing anything, or there were 100 cards that they could use to prevent that from happening. The problem with FanZ is that there's really no anti-skip mechanic, because up to this point, or an anti-skip, you know, function, because up to this point, skipping really didn't do anything. And I'm just kind of iterating what I've just said in the entirety of this one-man podcast. But here's just borderline. Here's the problem. Saiyan Oppressive Mastery needs to get scaled back. Okay, not just because it's annoying to watch your opponent play solitaire. It's the fact of the matter that you can't stop what's coming. It's the fact that you can't stop what's coming. It's detrimental to the Saiyan style altogether. It doesn't really... all these little nerfs here and there don't fix the mastery. And everything's just being overshadowed by Saiyan Oppressive Mastery. So, the biggest thing to concern. Oops. The biggest concern is just scaling it back. Get it to the point of good, but not broken. Don't make it define the game, the Saiyan style, and yeah, the game itself as a whole, because it's going to be detrimental from years to come. If you keep MPPV, do what I say. You know, you can get a dick ton of anger if your opponent would skip, but instead you gain anger or stages. So that way you can still run free Jita and still kick ass. But or Trunks, and you can still kick ass and do all this damage. You know, most people say, well, then it becomes a Broly problem. Broly is since Broly has come out, Broly has always been a problem. And what it does is it just kind of fixes what is happening currently. So that's just how I see it. I don't see this you cannot MPPV as a nerf, quote unquote, as much as it is just another walk around system, an excuse to say, oh look, it's been nerfed. And yeah, an MPPV you couldn't stop is powerful, but that doesn't change if, like, nerfing it does not prevent the enemy or the person who's using this to stop whatever their opponent is doing. So that's just my food. That's just kind of food for thought. This is just something. This is me belting out my own argument, and I think I'm done. You know, I don't rant too much. Again, I'm not one of these ranters. I don't really like, this is dumb. But, you know, consider this the first of many. Maybe I probably won't do a broadcast. I don't even think I'd probably get other guys on this. But just my opinions on Saiyan Oppressive Mastery, the nerf that they did. I think the Trunks nerf was kind of warranted. Maybe not in this current status. If they do fix it and to the point where it's like, oh yeah, it's good, but it's also not terrible. Like, it's not like, oh, I'm watching my opponent play solitaire. Maybe they would revert it back. But I don't know. So with all this said, my name is John, but not forgotten. I'll see you next time.